you're about to experience a new way to thrive in martial arts by exploring who you are, what you love, and standing up for what you believe in. It's time to rise, because this is where we challenge and say no to outdated industry norms and say yes to change, so that we create a healthier, happier, and thriving martial arts community. I'm your host, Laurien Tsuhake. Welcome to the Rise to Thrive podcast. I am so stoked to have Andrew Hardwick, otherwise known as Hardy or Andy, on this very podcast. We will be talking about the role strength and conditioning plays in grappling performance and much more. Hardy is a well-known strength and conditioning coach owning a degree in sport and exercise science. He's a BJJ Black belt, co-owner of the Grappling Society, and proud owner of a spaniel. This episode is perfect for athletes and coaches who are looking to optimize their performance and understanding of training science. Welcome, Hardy. Actually, it means Andrew, but you say Hardy.
So my official name is Andrew Hardwick, but since I was, year 4, so primary school, I was given the nickname Hardy, and it has stuck. So it's all anybody ever calls me. There's about 4 or 5 people who actually refer to me by my proper name, like my mum, my sister. But other than that, everyone just calls me Hardy.
Then, Hardy, otherwise known as Andrew, welcome to my podcast, and please introduce yourself to those who don't really know you yet.
Thank you for having me. As we said, obviously my official name is Andrew. I am a strength conditioning coach by trade. So I work with combat sports, but mainly sort of grapplers nowadays, really. I'm a bit more specialised in that form. I am also a black belt in jiu-jitsu, co-own a gym. For anyone that's watching it, obviously we'll be able to see behind me. I'm currently sat mat side. Co-own a gym. The gym's called the Grappling Society, which I own with my best mate and business partner. So a bit of everything, really.
Yeah, what I really would like to dive into today is the strength and conditioning part, because I do not know a lot about it. And when you're on social media, you see so much, and it's not usually it's oppositional. One claims this, one claims that. So I was just asking, maybe we can just start. I have a bunch of questions, not a bit more specific ones, as I am now diving into it because it's something that I need to get better at. But what do you think are a few myths that really need to be debunked when it comes to strength and conditioning, let's say specifically for grappling?
Okay, that's a really good question. So the biggest myth when it comes to strength and conditioning is that specialization exists at all. Whenever, and you mentioned a really good point in terms of social media. Social media for various different reasons, but obviously the primary selling point of social media is to try and create hype, isn't it? It's to try and create interest, engagement. And what that ends up happening is people sort of glamorize what strength conditioning is for the sport because they're trying to find a way to make it look sexy online. And the reality of that is that specialization, as it leads to the sport, in what most people think isn't really the case. What we're generally referring to when we're talking about specialization is within strength conditioning, when we're looking at a sport, what we do is we do something called a needs analysis. We look at the sport, what physical qualities does an individual need to be successful at that sport. So that could be anything from, like if you were playing football or rugby, you'd obviously need to be repeat sprintability would be a quality that they need to be able to do. They need to be able to be quite fast over a short period of distance, but also be able to repeat that. Obviously, if you comparison that to like a 100-meter runner, they just need to be as fast as physically possible, and then they can have loads of rest. They don't need to repeat that effort. And we generally will look at all these various physical qualities, whether it's strength, whether it's speed, whether it's explosiveness, all these different things. And we take those factors, and what we do is we write training about building those qualities through a very sort of general approach. And obviously within that as itself, we've got certain other areas. So you've obviously got the performance aspect. So for grappling, a really good example for grappling might be like obviously upper back strength. So your capacity to be able to pull your arm closer to your body, because obviously that's one of the key movements that we do within the sport, especially not as much in no gi, but very much so in the gi. Make a grip, be able to bring that person close to you. So you could look at it and go, right, well, we've got a performance aspect in that, let's say as an example, somebody should be able to do 3 chin-ups with an external weight of, I don't know, 50% of their body weight as a rough example. So that would be a very key performance metric. But within that, we've also got the element of, the term we use is like robustness. So sports in general, but grappling ever more so, is obviously highly linked with injuries. Anyone who's partaken in grappling will understand the injury risk. It's not as bad as some sports, but it is still prevalent in the sport. And we all like training. We all like being able to do it. So can we keep people on the mats for as long as we possibly can? So if we take a metric like the chin up, well, what does the chin up train? It trains, we get good extension through the shoulder. We get extension through our upper back. We get lengthening and shortening through our biceps, through our lat muscles, our trap muscles, all those different things. It's a compound movement, all these core activation, all that different stuff. And we know that can then have a transfer onto robustness as well, because the more physically capable the structures are themselves, the more robust that structure is going to be when it is put under load in more external circumstances like we do within the sport. So we can start to drive specificity through the lens of generality, if that makes sense. So it's where people get confused because they think, oh, I need to do movements that are like the sport. But what they're actually doing is essentially underloading. So we know that to get better at the sport, we need to train the sport, and to get better at improving the qualities we need to train to get better at the sport, we need to train those qualities. If we are in this middle ground where I don't even know, you see some wild stuff nowadays, but as an example, what have I seen? Like some of the worst examples is like people playing spider guard with a barbell, as an example. You're not developing your actual ability and your perception and attunement to information to play spider guard really well, but you're also not actually developing any physical qualities, i.e. the strength, capability of your hips, of your knees, of your legs, all that different stuff alongside of it. So usually what happens when we see specificity is what it gets shown on social media, is it's usually that middle ground where nothing is actually being trained.
That's wild. I have not seen that, but wow. But
There's some terrible terrible stuff.
Where I also was wondering, I mean, I know that from yoga, I mean, I love arm balances. And when I was diving deeper into that and the mechanics of it, many indeed say, yeah, for warming up to activate the right muscles, go into shapes that are similar to this arm balance pose, which maybe has some value. But I was like also thinking like what you said, that, yeah, but it doesn't add anything deeper or new or strengthening to it. It then indeed looks like the shape, but it doesn't really enhance the shape, so to speak.
So this is a fantastic question. This is a really, really good extension of that, because obviously everything that we do from a movement perspective is a skill, isn't it? So lifting weights is a skill. Jiu-jitsu is a skill. Being able to stand on one arm, 2 arms, a handstand, whatever, is a skill. Within that itself, there's always going to be physical components, so things that we need to be able to do physically, but there's also the organizational component in terms of we have to practice that thing. And this is where there's always an element of nuance within, especially within strength conditioning, but with any sort of task, is there's a principle. I don't know if you've ever heard of this principle. They call it the SAID principle. So it's specific adaptation to imposed demands. And what that means in non-technical language is we get good at the things that we practice doing. And our body is very, very good in the same way when we're learning jiu-jitsu, we organize around specific things. It's the same way as like you might get one person who's very good at arm bars, one person who's very good at leg locks. It's the same sport, but their specific adaptation relative to that skill and that task is slightly ever more developed in one area. So when you've got an exercise that requires a I don't want to say a higher degree of skill, but maybe it's a more of a complex organizational shape. So like a really, like I said, like a deep yoga pose or whatever. There's obviously a skilled component that comes with that. And what you can use in the same way that in jiu-jitsu on the mats, you would use like a scaled learning approach, wouldn't you? So you'd reduce the amount of information that they have to deal with, the amount of problems that they have to deal with, so that it's the information that you're trying to attune to is more widely available. We can do the exact same thing in the gym. So if we would say, like, if we took the example that I used before in terms of, right, somebody needs to be able to do a chin up with 50% of their body weight. Now that's quite a significant feat of strength. Not everybody is going to be able to do that straight away. And there's obviously going to be organizational qualities relative to that skill that somebody's going to have to learn whilst building up the physical capacity to be able to execute it. But what we can do is, in order to get to that, is we just regress the difficulty of the exercise. So you could use, I don't know, a band to give somebody some assistance on the pull. You could use, there are certain machines that will give you some assistance. It might be that you use a very, very regressed version where somebody has like their feet on the floor. You might change the tempo of the lift, the range of movement of the lift. So in that context, whilst you are developing the physical skill, again, this idea of representativeness is you always want to make it as close to the thing that you're trying to get better at as possible, but still employing an element of nuance that allows the person to develop the skill and the capacity to be able to then go on and execute in the fullest thing close to the thing that you want to work on.
That's very helpful. I like how you explain it, because indeed with yoga, we usually, with arm balancing, we add blocks. So you have a little bit more height, a bit more lift. So you have a bit more space to move, because otherwise some people, they don't have enough yet, then they can't lift. But with the blocks, they can lift. So then they can actually do the movement. So no, this makes a lot of sense to me, because also there are usually people say, oh, for arm balances, when you can do a push-up, you can do most arm balances, which for many is true. But there are also those where you definitely need a specific amount of mobility to even get into that position, let alone lift off from it. So
Yeah, exactly.
my other question. So I've been reading books about more strength and conditioning, and there came this topic, periodization.
Okay, there we go.
There you go. And I wrote it all down. And there's also an exercise that I should, write a periodization for like a year and write this all down. And as I was doing that, I was like, oh my, this sucks so much for jiu-jitsu, because I know for other sports, you have really like seasons, you have an on season, off season. With jiu-jitsu, if you want, it can kind of be ongoing depending on what you want to do. So
Yeah, 100%.
I made one for our gym, in a sense that we have like usually 2 big tournaments close to our gym, where most people go at least twice a year. Of course, there are others, they also travel further and do more, but like these two. So I tried to kind of created something there what would make sense. But I found it very hard, and I would like to actually know a bit more about periodization and what your thoughts are on that, particularly as it pertains to grappling.
Okay. So periodization essentially is a plan. That's all it essentially is. And within the plan, what you're fundamentally trying to do is there's a really good analogy for this, and it's turning up and down a dial. So in theory, traditional periodization, in terms of what it originally was. So yeah, I think a really important distinction to make is a lot of the literature and understanding of strength conditioning as it means to periodization came from sort of Eastern Bloc Olympic weightlifting. So like Bulgarians, people like that, they were heavily involved with this idea of periodization. And obviously within strength sports, or more sort of Olympic sports, we should use that term, there are obviously very clear cycles, aren't there? The Olympics are every 4 years. The World Championships might be every 2 years. I actually don't know when they are, but so you have very clear points. And the fundamental goal of a periodization is to build up the relative qualities to be able to perform and execute the thing that you want to be able to do. So obviously, if you're looking at traditional weightlifting, Olympic weightlifting, they obviously need to be extremely strong, extremely explosive, extremely mobile. And as again, if we use this idea of a needs analysis, they would say, right, well, you've got clean and jerk, you've got snatch and press and all this different stuff. what do I need to be able to do? Well, we need to be able to do those things. So the skill component, so they're always practicing the skill component because that is the thing that they do. But they obviously need to be able to develop the strength of their legs, the strength of their arms, strength of their shoulders. They're tying all these things together in terms of the robustness and the physical qualities that they need. So what that might look like on paper in a traditional sense is you would have like a period, they call it like there's I can't remember the actual technical term. It's gone. My brain's gone blank. But essentially, what you would do is you'd have like a hypertrophy block. So you'd build muscle for 4 weeks, then you'd have a strength block for 4 weeks, then you'd have a power block for 4 weeks, and then you'd have a peaking block for 4 weeks. As a rough example, don't quote me on that. It's just the easiest way to explain it. And obviously, this is going to depend on the sport and what the demands of the competition are. The difficulty with that, especially as it comes to combat sports, is like you've mentioned, we don't have very clear in seasons and off seasons. So you might have a person who competes once a month, twice a month, every month. They might have one period where they're off for 3 months, but then they do 4 competitions in 1 month. And it very much depends on their schedule. It's a little bit easier if somebody is very much focused on the big competition. So I've got a client, Libby, and she pretty much exclusively follows the IBJJF gi and no gi season. So it's obviously always changes ever so slightly, but we've got a very rough idea of, right, her primary comps are going to fall around this time every year. So it's easy to start to build a plan up long term in terms of like, right, we need to rest here and all this different stuff. The nuance comes into it because obviously sports in general are complex and variable, and there's always something that could go wrong. So there's the old Mike Tyson quote is everyone's got a plan till they get punched in the face is very much sort of apt for when it comes to periodization, because we could sit down and write a 12-month phase of training that looks perfect. It covers everything that we need to cover. 2 weeks into it, somebody blows their ACL. Game over. So what is becoming more sort of used within, especially within combat sports, is this idea of concurrent training. So concurrent training essentially is less variable. So there's less massive jumps. You're not going from like hypertrophy to strength to power to thing. You're essentially training qualities all year round. And then relative to competition and periods of quote unquote peaking, this idea of you turn a vial up and down. So you might like reduce the overall amount of strength work that somebody does, and you might turn the vial up on the amount of work that their more jumping work, their power work they might do, as an example. And again, you can tweak and change this depending on, in like jiu-jitsu, it could be gi versus no gi. So gi might need a higher level of isometric strength. So you might, in a gi season, quote unquote season, you might do more holds. So you might do more like end range holds, things like that are going to transfer over to the gi a little bit more. In a no gi season, you might spend a little bit more time on being explosive, moving strength, moving weight a little bit faster, all these different things. So the reality is it's a slightly longer term view. So what you're actually doing is that there's a really good strength coach called Dan John, an American guy, and he has this terminology that I really like, and he calls it the park bench versus the bus stop analogy. And essentially what that means is, obviously a bus stop is a very specific thing. You have a plan, there's a schedule, I've got to get this bus at this time. It's going to take me from this place to this place. You spend minimal amounts of time there. It's very direct. Versus a park bench is somewhere that typically, not that I spend much time sitting on park benches, I've got to admit, but like typically you might take the dog, you might just have a sit down, you could have a picnic, you could read a book, you could just people watch. It's much more of a relaxed experience. And I always really like that analogy, because essentially what we're doing for the most part is this idea of a park bench, is that we're not as stressed about outcomes all the time. It's very much, you can make decisions, you can change your mind. It's very auto-regulated based on how you're feeling, how's your training week going, all this different stuff, as opposed to the bus stop, which would be like, no, you need to go in and hit this lift on this day at this weight, and that's going to get us into this position.
Follow-up question, since you made a difference between gi and no gi training, would you say that people that tend to do more gi or no gi, or actually do both, but there are moments where it's more no gi season gi, would you then also recommend them to? Would that change their strength and conditioning greatly, to a great extent, or it remains it largely similar
It would
in general?
it would it would very much so. To you, this is a proper strength conditioning term. It depends. So it very much depends on the person. For the most part, it's going to remain pretty similar. There's not going to be that much that changes. There might just be a couple of things here and there, depending on the person, depending on their performance, things like that. They tweak. Again, things like an example that could be, and again, I'm not saying that this is actually gospel, because this could, again, very much depend on the person. The gi training is obviously very hand dependent. Obviously, your hands connect. I mean, they're doing no gi as well, but there's a little bit less stress on your hands in no gi. So, for example, an example that you could change in the gi is you do a little bit more work on grip strength, as an example. Whereas in no gi, it might just be, like I said, you might do a little bit more sort of explosive work, a little bit less sort of time, for want of a better word, time under tension. But that really is sort of few and far between. That's when you're getting really down into the nooks and crannies of it. You'd be nitpicking there, depending on the athlete. For the most part, it's pretty much exactly the same.
Okay. I have to process it all.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
As I'm also using this because I have so many questions and I should really write them down more when they come as I go from my journey. But I find nowadays in where I'm at is that I feel that physicality becomes more of a thing. And I don't know whether that's just my perception or whether that's true in the beginning. I mean, when I look like 11 years ago when I started, when I would look at the Euros, it was not as professional yet. I mean, I think still we can go a long way to becoming more professional.
Yeah.
But if I would look at the podium, you would have people that were ripped. You would have people that didn't look fit at all, but could still win. And if I compare it to the podium picks of nowadays, I find that the bodies have changed in general. And I also sense like, I mean, Jiu-Jitsu is also still a power game. Yes, skill is important, but it's also really a power game. And this, I think that's still often a bit downplayed. And that I notice now also because the last years I've been quite unlucky that I got really sick with weird things and had also my fair share of injuries. And I just sense that I haven't gotten back to the fitness that I had to. And I noticed that it's really sometimes a bottleneck that I'm like, it's not so much that my skill is lacking, it's really like my physicality is lacking. And I was just curious what your thoughts are on the landscape of how jiu-jitsu in general, or submission grappling, if you will, how that's changing in terms of physicality.
So it's again, fantastic question. So there's a couple of things that are worth pointing out. Obviously, as sports develop, naturally, the requirement of effort that a person has to put into that sport is obviously going to improve, isn't it? Because as the level increases, the amount of, I guess, decisions that a person has to make to be able to perform and be successful obviously are going to be heightened. So, for example, if you were to look at a sport, so football is a really good example because obviously football is the biggest sport on earth. They have the best of everything in terms of resources, facilities, technology, all that different stuff. If you were to go and look at what the footballer does in their training room, what they're probably at now is at a level where the biggest separator is going to be technology because they've got access to it. So they're constantly looking to get that absolutely 1% out of the best. They've got the fittest guys, they've got the biggest guys, they've got the strongest guys, they've got the most skillful guys. Jiu-jitsu, as is still obviously relatively in its infancy. It's still a very new sport. And within that, obviously, as the sport develops as a whole, the level of effort that each individual is willing to put into it to get the most out of their performance increases. That's obviously going to come with the context of they are doing more work in and around the sport, whether it's psychologically, whether it's nutritionally, whether it's physically. So you are going to get bigger, stronger, faster, more explosive people because the analogy is almost like if you were to compare, I don't know, if you were to, I'm not going to know anything about Formula One, but if you were to compare Formula One 100 years ago, the cars at that time were very fit for purpose. And as everybody's tried to gain the edge, the cars have got bigger, they've got faster, the engines have got a bigger capacity. Again, lack of understanding as it comes to Formula One. I do apologise, but it's a good analogy of that. Like jiu-jitsu in its infancy was the sort of smaller, slower car, and as people are wanting to get better and better and better and better and better, they obviously now understand that they need to be able to train the sport to the best of their capabilities, and being as fit and as being as physically capable as they can be is going to allow them to train more, but it's also going to allow them to perform at a better level. If we think one of the easiest ways to break this down is if you think about your physicality as like your hardware and your skill as your software, the better that hardware runs, the more the software is able to perform. So people are, don't get me wrong, it's still very much the Wild West, but as the game as a whole improves and we're getting a wider pool of people training, meaning people who would normally go and play traditional sports and now taking up jiu-jitsu, the physical capability of an individual is slowly getting better and better.
Yeah, I have an observation and another follow-up question. Like we have now in our gym a few weightlifters, and so they were already extremely fit when they came in. And as you know, we also then adopt live training, some more constraints led. It's just amazing what they can do in 3 months.
Yeah.
It's that I look at this and I'm like, oh my God. But also because they recover quickly, their bodies can handle it, so they can also come often. Where I know other people that, let's say, quote unquote, normal people. I mean, there's also normal people that do weightlifts, but like when you have parents that have also a desk job, and even if they would want to train more often, their bodies just need more rest. So I see the magic actually when you have indeed where the hardware is so solid there, that the software that is just, for me, it's amazing to watch and also very inspiring. That's why also I want more of it. But I can see how that has such a tremendous impact, which leads me to my follow-up question. So if we think of the best right now in the grappling space, so that's people that are all super disciplined when it comes to recovery, nutrition, training, all that. What do you think would be something that they could look at, or what could change that they could have an upper edge, considering that they are already, the 1%?
Well, this is a very good question. I mean, my answer as a whole and is usually the way that I'm a big believer. And it sounds daft because my job technically is putting people in the gym and getting them stronger and fitter. But for me, the sport always leads. So I'm a big believer that the sport is always the thing. And regardless of how good somebody is, there are usually ways of getting more quality out of the things that you're already doing. So that for me is always number one. Now, within that, what if you were talking about the best guys? Now, jiu-jitsu is a weird sport because even the best guys do some weird and wonderful things. So there's potentially a lot of things that you could unpick as a whole. But I think the biggest mistake I see for the most part is people have a lack of understanding of this idea of quality over quantity. I think for a long time, jiu-jitsu has been very much favoured around how much work can I do, as opposed to what quality of work can I do. And I think if you were to, obviously don't get me wrong, like to be very, very good at the sport, you need to practice the sport a lot. But if we go back to this idea of like, well, the sport is the thing that we're trying to get better at, the more of the sport that we can do, trying to put ourselves in a better position to be able to do that as often as we can is the best solution. And that usually comes down to having better understanding of, I guess the general term would be recovery, but the demands and the things that you're asking your sport to do. So again, if we use an example of like a more professional environment, so if you were looking at a professional rugby team or a professional football team, schedules will be very much dependent on them performing on a game day. That would be like, so rugby is a good example because rugby is an extremely physical game. A rugby player's week will be very much based off, so they'll play a game and then everything is then based around improving so that they're good to go on the next game day. And then not saying that jiu-jitsu players need to do that, because obviously competition can frequency is a very open topic. But I think if jiu-jitsu players as a whole had a better understanding of their training demands per week and what impact that has on them long term in terms of being able to execute to the best that they can, they would get more out of their training. Does that make sense?
It does, because I saw some weeks ago, I think, also a reel from DeAndre Corbe where he also said that he feels now so much better, even though I mean, I don't know if I remember correctly, but he then named how many hours he trained before per day, and that now that I mean, it's still a lot, but
Yeah,
reduced, and that he felt so much better. And I think me myself, I experienced it like when I started. I also got very quickly addicted, so I was in training 9 times a week for like a year, but it took its toll on my body because at that point I was only 48 kilos. And that's also where
yeah,
my disc herniations come from. Because when I got my
yeah,
blue belt, people were like, oh, okay, she's a blue belt now. So we don't need to take into account that she's light. So they stacked me so hard that my
yeah,
discs were like, boop, let's go out. But now when I look at the people in our gym, most they train 2 times, 3 times because most are family people. They have work, they have kids. They're not professionals in that sense. But what they do within 3 to 6 months, they totally surpassed me easily as when I was training 9 times a week for a whole year. And I find that amazing. So there you could see that their quality of training is so much higher. I mean, of course, in my biased opinion, the training we offer them is much better than what I got. But
yeah.
besides that, if you also look at just the number, 2 to 3 times, and they would just easily surpass me within a few months.
Yeah, 100%. Dave, so for anyone who doesn't know, I run a podcast with my friend Dave, who's also a strength conditioning coach, and he's used this quote before, which I really really like, is that like if you think you're training at 100% every day, what you're actually doing is training at 50% because it's just not possible to sustain that level of effort. And I think that is very much in line with like what you said. I mean, obviously, like you said, hopefully, I'd like to say the same for our gym. Guys coming 3 times a week and getting really, really good. And I look back to, I was very similar to you when I first started, was training a stupid amount of twice a day, every day. And yeah, all right, don't get me wrong. I'll always admit that has got me to the place that I am now. But the place I am now is also very similar to you, where I'm physically knackered. So yeah, I think you bang on the money, and but it takes a level of there's a level of training maturity that has to develop from a person, and sometimes, unfortunately, it takes somebody learning that lesson the hard way in terms of they pick up an injury or whatever it is, and it gives them the ability to reflect. Some people get really lucky in terms of that they might just get ill quite a lot to begin with, and then they go, oh, this isn't very good, and they manage to dodge that bullet, whereas some people will pick up a pretty significant injury and that'll make them go, oh, well, maybe I do need to just ease off a little bit how much I'm doing here. But yeah, DeAndre Corby is a fantastic example. I really like listening to DeAndre because he's got everything. He seems to take everything that you'd want from a professional jiu-jitsu athlete seriously. He understands the role of training with intention. Obviously, he's obviously got a good setup for that in terms of supporting him. He takes his off the mat work extremely serious in terms of he's trying to be as prepared as he possibly can heading into each training session. That means he's recovering well, he's eating well, he's giving his body time to rest, and it is about, I think, and that's the big thing is funnily enough, me and Josh had a conversation with one of our lads yesterday about this, is that going into training, you want to be as prepared for training as you possibly can be. We know that skill degrades with fatigue. The more fatigued you are, the less impactful learning has, and the less physical output you have, especially like our gym, same as your gym, everything is done in a live environment. If you're tired, you're not going to get as much out of it as you would have if you were fresh. So trying to go into each training session as physically prepared to do so as you can be, make sure you're well fed, hydrated, your body's rested. Obviously, it's a combat sport. Sometimes you're going to be sore, sometimes you're going to be stiff. If you're trying to navigate that all the time, you're never going to get anything done. But trying to be better at the other areas so that every training session is as impactful as it possibly can be.
Yeah, I noticed that. What a few of our people struggle with is like eating before class, that they have like stomach issues. Like my husband Alex
Mm-hmm.
also has that. Do you have some ideas, tips for that?
Yeah, so the when it comes, it's a very common thing that people struggle with. Obviously, depending on the time of the day, is going to impact how you approach this. A really really simple thing that it works, because you always have that balance, don't you? If people don't want to be too full when they're training, but they also don't want to be starving that they're not getting any energy in. So the general solution is, as again a general advice, obviously depending on somebody's, if they've got a stomach condition or whatever, that's when you need to go and speak to somebody who's qualified in this area. But what that might look like is, and again, this depends on what time somebody trains, but say somebody's training in the evening. Most jiu-jitsu gyms operate like 5, 6, 7 o'clock. So what that probably looks like is you probably want to have a little bit more of a substantial meal, maybe 3 hours before. So that could be like a normal meal, I don't know, whatever you do, protein, carbohydrate, veg, usual meal. And then an hour before, you'd look at having some really simple carbohydrate. So that could be like basically sugar. So honey, fruit. You can use, like, I don't know if you have them where you are, but they're like squares bars. They're like rice crispy squares bars, things like that. Essentially very like carbohydrate dense food that's not going to come at the cost of satiety. So it's not going to make you feel really full. So it's going to give you energy. It's going to give you the boost that you need, but without coming at the cost of giving you an upset stomach when you're training. The difficulty with nutrition is there's quite a lot of trial and error involved, because obviously everyone's different preferences, things they like, don't like, food choices. And you get, like you said, like certain stomach conditions, they might not tolerate certain types of foods very well, which makes it more difficult. Again, that's where an actual nutritional specialist would have to come into the mix. But as a general rule, trying to eat something substantial a couple hours before, and then an hour and a half having something small but dense, sugary, will just give you that energy burst that you need to get you through training. Obviously, if somebody's training, I'd say if anyone's training upwards of 2 hours per session, then you could potentially look at adding some intra-session carbohydrates. This usually be like a drink or like an energy gel. Things like that work really, really well, because again, like that's why endurance athletes use them, because they're generally tolerated quite well from a digestion standpoint. But they obviously give them that burst of energy as they feel themselves dropping off.
Yeah, I remember one time when I was then still quite immature when it comes to training, and there was this one day I was just so starving, because I also realized later I wasn't eating enough, or not eating. I think I screwed up like everything that you could screw up, and I just put in this big pizza. I ate it. I didn't even have that much time in between, but I just had to eat it. But I felt so good.
Yeah.
I felt that I was like as far as I could smash. It's a fun experience, and it also taught me something indeed about that. Like these days, I learn much more. If I feel there is a need, then I tried my best to satisfy it as quickly as I can. Sometimes you have to wait, but like based on how I can, and also with like the training maturity, I had to laugh because nowadays I have a good friend of mine. She, Bove, and I are a bit in the same boat, and so every time when we make the right decision, and instead of training hard or whatever, we alter training or we do something else, that we are very proud and share that with each other, because you still feel a bit like FOMO and missing out, because of course
Yeah,
you
of
want
course.
to train. It's hard, I find, especially after injuries, recovery. It's tough.
Yeah, it is tough. I think your relationship with training is such an impactful thing that I think often gets neglected. And again, it comes with that training maturity in terms of understanding that you're not actually missing out on anything. A question I quite like to use with clients is, so the question I always ask is, if you're in a position where you're not sure whether to train or not, the question you ask is, is going to training tonight going to add to my performance or take away from it? And it could just be something that just really helps you rationalize it, in terms of like, if you are sore, tired, beat up, work's being a pain, your kids are screaming, the dog's not behaving itself, like you have got that capacity to go, do you know what? Tonight ain't the one. I just need to decompress, go home, read a book, get a hot bath, have a good meal and sleep. Another day you might be like, do you know what? I'm being a bit soft here. I need to give myself a talking to and get myself into the gym. But That relationship with training is a big thing in jiu-jitsu, I think. And this idea of like, you're just missing out. I need to be doing more. I need to be doing this. And it's like, no, you can be all right and just, you'll be okay.
Yeah, I have this conversation often, but more through the lens of trauma-informed coaching, so the mental aspect of it. So that for some
Yeah.
people, if they cannot train as martial arts for right or wrong reasons, is their escape, so to speak, is then also very daunting, especially when there's an injury involved, when they are sick or often sick. That for some, that can be a prelude of new depressing episodes. Do you have ideas on like if somebody cannot train the way they would want to, let's say not that they don't have a cold, let's say may injury or something else that would prevent them and that may impact their mental health greatly, do you have some ideas, some tips that they could take into account if they cannot do what they exactly want to do, but that you also don't have to completely burn the bridge either?
I've got a lot. I can speak with experience on this. To give a bit of context, for the last 3 years, I've been dealing with like a nerve injury, and it's basically just meant I've not really been able to train that much for sort of the last 3 years. I have like spells where I can train and then spells where I can't train. Currently in a spell where I can't train. And when this first happened, and again, it's always interesting. Sometimes I always say this, like sometimes naivety is the best thing, because obviously having a degree of expertise in a subject, you tend to overthink everything. So when I first had this injury, I like grossly overreacted, and didn't put me in a very good position at all. Was sort of like having like panic attacks, was extremely anxious, like really low, for many reasons, obviously. But I guess the big one was the thing that I loved more than anything doing and attached so much of my job is this sport. Do you know what I mean? Like I own a gym, I'm a coach for people in grappling, like where all my friends go, like, and it was the sort of panic of that being taken away. So I've got a lot of experience in this subject, funnily enough, and I think it's something that is really, really important, because when I speak to, it's the one thing without a shadow of a doubt that I get asked about the most is injury, because it's the thing that we're all terrified of happening, because it's the thing that takes away our passion, our escapism, like you said. So I think first and foremost, something that I'm really big on. I don't know. I actually don't. You'll have to apologise for my ignorance. I don't know much about trauma in informed coaching. But so the big thing that I use is this idea of controllables. So like, what in that situation can you control? So it can be something as simple as like, right, well, I can go see a physio or a physical therapist. I can go and see a doctor, whatever you need to do in that area. It might be something. It could be something as simple as like I use the 3-day rule in injuries. So if I've got a client that messaged me and I've done this, I've hurt my knee, whatever. It's like, right, we just take 3 days, so we don't do anything for 3 days. So the idea with the 3-day rule is that it just brings that level of threat down a little bit. So that initial panic starts to settle. You're not Googling, you're not booking appointments. You just 3 days. Go and sit on your backside, take some painkillers if you need to, eat what you want to do, throw a paddy if you want to have a throw paddy, but just 3 days of nothing. So you're just trying to build a layer of control into this. So like, what I would recommend to clients is if somebody came to me and was like, from a physical standpoint, because physical activity is really, really important, isn't it? Obviously not just for your health, but for your mental health, all this different stuff. But it becomes a case of like, right, well, what can we do? Can we walk? Brilliant, right? Walk for 30 minutes every day. Can we, and you can regress and progress this. If somebody's had a horrific injury, I don't know, they're in a car crash, can you wiggle your big toe? Right, well, let's start with the big toe and let's see what we can build up from there. Eventually we can bend your leg. Eventually we can bend 2 legs, whatever it is. For most people, obviously that's a very, very, very rare and severe injury, but it might be like, right, you've hurt your knee. Can we go and do some upper body stuff? Whatever it is. Can we sit on a rower? Can we get on a skier? Can we get on a bike? Can we bench press? Can we do chin-ups? Can we do squats? Whatever the injury is, depending on the thing. And usually just the biggest advice I can give to anybody when it comes to injury is especially the physical side, is like, what can you control? What can you do? What can't you do? Right, let's focus entirely on what you can do and try and forget about what you can't do for now. We'll get to that eventually, but let's start with what you can, because that is always the process to getting back to the thing that you can't do right now.
Yeah, I think also that one of the next issues that I've witnessed a lot is that after an injury, whether that's physical or mental, it's like, let's I like the analogy of like when you break a bone, then usually you get a cast because there was too much stress, so it broke, and that takes time. But as that heals, your muscles get no exposure whatsoever, so they get weak as hell as well. So even though at one point the bone is set, it doesn't mean you still have the same muscle strength. You cannot just go back to where you left off. And I
Yeah.
noticed that for many, that is sometimes extra disheartening, especially on a mental plane, that they kind of are healed, but they also kind of are not, and they have to rebuild it. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So typically, that the point that you're describing is actually the point that most people struggle with, because, and again, depending on the injury is going to dictate. Like a broken leg's a really good example, because you have a very, very visceral piece of feedback in the early stages reminding you not to do certain things. So like I said, you've got a big cast on your leg, you can't move the leg. If it's like a knee injury, it might start with pain, inflammation. So you've got very, very real sensitive information that your body's going, no, you can't do that. The most difficult bit is, like you said, when that pain subsides, that inflammation subsides, and they're like, well, I can walk, I can do this thing. And it's like, yeah, but you're not quite ready to do the thing that you want to do yet. It's always a case with like, ACLs are the worst, because obviously an ACL reconstruction from time of operation to return to play can be 12 months realistically to be sort of fully fit. Probably, to be honest, to be completely 100%, you're probably looking at anywhere from 12 to 18 months. But there will be a point about that 6 month mark, maybe even a little bit earlier, where your doctors, your physios or whatever will be like, right, you can go and lift some weights, you can run a little bit, you can jump on a bike, whatever it is. And the brain starts going, all right, I can do all this. I can go do a bit of jiu-jitsu. And that's the hardest part, because then you have to go, no, we're not quite ready for that yet. But again, the reason I like controllables is because it's such a good reference point, in that no matter where you are on a rehab journey, you can just steer your attention towards the thing that you can do. And again, obviously, I know like the Greg quote is, intention affects attention. So if you can focus your intention on, I don't know, squatting or riding a bike or whatever it is, the ever activity, that's going to affect your attention. You can get all the positive stuff. You can get the confidence. You can get the sort of self-fulfilling prophecy of like, oh no, I'm actually getting better because I could do this. And that's actually a really good thing that we use for like the mental side of it, is just reflection and just being able to go, well, it's a bit annoying now, but where was I 4 months ago, 5 months ago? I couldn't even walk 4 months ago. Whereas now I can squat, I can ride a bike, I can run. This is good. That was awful. This is okay. I can manage this. And it's just having that little bit of context and a bit of ability to go, right, it's not where I want to be, but I can look back and reflect on that now.
Yeah, I remember because I had my ACL torn and I had the surgery. And
Yeah.
what I found, so I think the rehab I did really well. I had also the luck, I think, of course, that I already had the gym, so I could still be involved by teaching. So, like after 2 weeks, I could already, like yoga, I could teach. I couldn't do everything, but I could cue people.
Yeah.
And also with COA, you can design the environment. So, and the kids were for me great because at one point they were so light. Even if they did something that wasn't good for my leg, it didn't matter because I could even lift
Yeah.
the leg, could just lift them up, so all would be well. But what for me was the hardest was stand up. Like it happened in stand up, but it was just really a freak accident where you had the mats, they weren't fitted, so there was a gap
Right.
and my
Okay.
foot came in there and was stuck, and then somebody tried to off balance me and just my kneecap just blew out and back in. But what I found the most scary was indeed the to also shoot on that knee, to hop on that knee, even though it perfectly could. And that's where Dance Dance Revolution helped a lot because then I had to hop, and Zumba helped a lot because
Yeah,
I
yeah,
had to do it. Because sometimes if I would give, so to speak, a command to my leg, there was like this latency, this lag that was like later, like was very strange. But that took for me the longest. So getting back on the mat was relatively easy and doing many things too, but that bit. So I really started just to rub my knee against walls and on the ground, just that it got used to the fact that it was okay. But that was
yeah.
for me mentally. I remember one time it was really still pretty early on. I think it was not even, I think it was like 8 months post. And my husband just suddenly he wanted to show something. And suddenly he just took my healthy leg. So I was hopping on my lap and that just I could cry. It was unexpected. There was no consent given, and that was for me the absolute worst. And that really took a long time before that bit was fine. Even though I rationally know that my leg was fine by then, like especially like after a year, because I was kind of written okay after 9 months, but I after a year I waited a year to then compete, and I had I didn't think of it, so that was totally fine. But I remember that moment where he just snatched it, and I stood on that leg. It was for me the absolute worst.
I've got a really good mate of mine is a physiotherapist, and he has a saying when it comes to injuries, and he sort of says there's going to become a point in time where you just have to decide you're not injured anymore,
Yeah.
and you just mentally have that switch. And I sort of say it to clients in that because the one of the, like you've mentioned there, one of the hardest parts of injury is that psychological battle because your brain, for want of a better word, is sort of built the relationship that that certain part is weak, is not prepared, it's painful, it's scary. And obviously, like you said, when you get to a 12-month period, all the signs are you're fine. You can lift X amount of weight, you can hop, you can do all this stuff in a controlled manner. What you have to introduce is chaos. You have to give it a bit of chaos. So your brain starts to shut that threat system down and starts to go, right, this is okay. We can do this. And build your confidence that you can actually do it. And I always say that to clients. I always say, like, when we're in a position where we're going like, no, everything is fine, you're good to go. I always say, look, you're just going to have to go and grab somebody who you're a little bit unsure of. Maybe he's not very good at pacing. Maybe they're a little bit all over the place. And you're just going to have to roll. And like, you're just going to have to, once you get there, it happened to me. I mean, I've had 2 surgeries on the same knee. I had ACL and I've had all the meniscus took out. And it happened to me. And as I was like reintroducing training, I actually didn't do it on purpose, but that I was with a lad. I don't know if it doesn't really happen at our gym, but like, like every now and again, someone will just like jump on someone and we'll just start training. He basically did that to me. And it was like my brain, my automatic jiu-jitsu brain just kicked in. And I just started training like I wasn't protecting the knee. I was just using it. And after that, it was fine. And sometimes you just need that. You need that little bit of evidence to your brain that it's like, oh no, I'm good here. I'm fine.
Yeah, for that you need indeed a bit of pressure, a bit of
Yeah. Yeah, you do.
you do this exposure that it's actually okay. Because I had that was very interesting. I was once in Texas, and there the theme was play, so I introduced the constraints led approach, and we did some armbar stuff, and it was more on controlling, so you were not supposed to actually stretch
Yeah,
and
yeah.
break the arm yet. And the feedback I got, and I found it so fascinating, was that there was one woman and she had shoulder and elbow surgery. And ever since, she had been very much afraid for arm bars and shoulder locks. But this she liked because she knew there wasn't the threat of immediate submission. She had time to get more comfortable again in that position, get exposure of that position, and to work her way out. And she said later, she wrote that she did that also more in training, I believe, with other people, and that was like her way back. And I think that that's maybe not much talk about, but where I thought that game design or task based, they can actually help people also reintegrate easier in training after an injury, because it is life work. And of course, you can also scale up and down the intensity, but you can indeed give them a space where they can kind of feel some pressure, get some exposure again, where a body part was injured without there's this immediate threat that something would go bad again. So that was interesting feedback that I didn't expect at that time.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I mean, not I don't know how much you've read into this, but obviously when it comes to pain and injury, the understanding of the mechanisms behind injury nowadays is obviously developing much more. So obviously previously injury was looked at as this like very physical thing in terms of this joint gets exposed to this stress, this position, bang goes the ACL, whatever. But obviously as modern sort of understanding of people, of behaviour, all these different things, where the understanding of the complexity of injury occurrence is developing. And obviously one of the sort of points of that is this idea of like chronic pain, chronic issues. And what a lot of sort of more modern theories are based on is this idea that obviously your brain, it's almost like a learned mechanism. So if you've got something that's gone wrong in the past and your brain perceives it as a threat, it will obviously reproduce pain signals to try and get you to stop doing it. A lot of the, how do you overcome that? Well, I mean, again, I'm not my expertise. I'm not qualified, unfortunately, to talk at that depth about that level of psychology. But at a basic level, what you do is exposure therapy, don't you? You expose that thing that you felt something was wrong to things that it knows it can do, and you have the confidence to then do it and gradually expose yourself to it. A really good example of that, and it is actually one of the only real applications for, I believe, for the dreaded D word, which is drilling, is that if you've got somebody who is injured and you're wanting to build up just their sort of tolerance to do the thing, drilling is a really good low entry point because they're getting an element of psychological benefit because they're somewhat doing the sport. I know they're not doing the sport, but for the sake of the people listening, let's just pretend they are. They're getting a bit of that. They're getting a little bit of mobility, a bit of movement. They're getting blood flow moving. So they're generally going to feel better after doing that. And then if you wanted to progress it, like you said, that using more game-based stuff is a fantastic bridge between static, low intensity work and full intensity sparring, because you could take a game like an arm bar and say, we're not going to extend it, we're not going to do this, but somebody's just building that mental confidence of like, oh no, it feels all right, I'm not getting my arm extended, I can be in this position. And you're just slowly introducing that exposure to the brain to the point where once they feel comfortable with that, you can go, right, extend the arm and just see how, do you know what I mean? Like layering that complexity of not just the skilled behavior, but also the psychological association that comes with that previous injury.
Yeah, there's an interesting example. I mean, funnily enough, PhD I started is about pain behavior. And
Oh, really? That is
yeah,
interesting. Sorry.
oh, no, not at all. I'm just, you gave me a good opportunity to talk about it again. There was this neuroscientist who also really dives deep into pain, and he's from Australia. And he really got fascinated because I don't know how old he was, but he was once walking and he just felt something scratching his leg, and he just thought, "Oh, that was a twig or something." Next thing he knew, he wakes up in the hospital because it was a snake bite. And
Jeez.
so he survived. But what was interesting was that after that, if he would walk and something, even if it's soft, something would touch his leg, he would feel excruciating pain, which was fascinating because when he got bitten, it just felt like a scratch. It didn't feel like anything, but clearly it was very life threatening. So for him, it took a very long time to indeed retrain the brain that if you feel something on the leg, that it doesn't immediately mean that you're about to die, essentially. And especially with chronic pain, it's so even harder because chronic pain, like if I know I have pain because my leg is broken, I know, and there's usually also procedures. There's usually roundabout how long that's going to take. But if it's indeed
Yeah.
chronic, you have no idea, and it's so hard to give meaning to it. Also, when you don't know what causes it, what that, and in general, there are so many misunderstandings and misconceptions also regarding pain. Like I know that uh, archaeologists, for instance, when they find human remains, they look at spines, they saw spines, and they saw they were degenerated. And they were like, ah, yeah, these people definitely had chronic pain. And I'm like, you don't know that. Because what we now know from modern scans is that we can see that there are many people, they have no back pain whatsoever, but their spines may look even more messed up than mine is.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
100%.
it's indeed, there's more going on, that just because there's a scan doesn't mean it's that. I know many people, myself also included, some had, I mean, I did not have back surgery, I would never ever do this, but people that did, but didn't change anything. So even though on the
Yeah,
scan it looked like, yeah, but you have a bulging disc, yeah, and clearly there it was usually something with the feet or the hips or something that they had to work out, and then actually they were fine. And that's, I
yeah,
think,
yeah.
what's so fascinating about the body and pain in general.
Yeah, it is. It is. I mean, it's a very long-winded conversation, isn't it? In terms of, and this is the difficulty with, I guess, injury as a whole, as it leads in my businesses, is it's very easy to point the finger at one thing and sort of say like, oh, this is the cause, this is the cause. And again, there's a lot of people trying to sell that in jiu-jitsu, that you're getting injured because you're not doing this right. You're getting injured because you're not doing this right. And obviously it's a pain, for want of a better word, excuse the pun, it's a pain point for people, isn't it? It's like something that means a lot to them. So people attach themselves to certain things because they're like, oh, this is going to fix it. This is going to keep me on the mats. And it's very difficult to explain to somebody that their injury didn't necessarily occur because of the reasons they think it did. The way I always like to explain it is like, I always say like, why now? So if you've, I don't know, sprained an ankle is a good example. Like, how many times have you misplaced your foot, you've slipped on the mat funny, whatever it is? Why this one time is your ankle sprained? Now, yeah, right, there is very definitely a biomechanical reason for that ankle sprain. You've overloaded the tendons, the ligaments, you've extended the range of movement, all that different stuff. It becomes a question of like, well, every other time it's happened, why have you been able to stabilize? Why have you not had any pain, not any flare up? Or you might have just had like a little bit of a, oh, that was a bit risky, and not thought anything of it. And that is the impossible question to answer because we don't know. We can't pinpoint to anything. Yeah, we could go, right, well, you've not slept for the past 4 weeks because you've got a newborn. You've been eating rubbish food. You're not very hydrated. You're 10 rounds into a sparring session and you're shattered. The mats are slippy, all this different stuff. You can draw sort of parallels, but causation doesn't always equal correlation, does it? So it's very, very difficult to pinpoint that one thing.
Do you so for female grapplers, like I also read now more about when we have our periods, that
Yeah,
apparently our knees are a bit more prone to blowing out.
yeah, yeah.
So every time when I have it with stand up, I do more like grip fighting. I definitely change than what I do that week. Do you also work with female grapplers with that? That you say, hey, in your period time, we need to change things a little.
So it very much depends, and it depends on the female. I would be lying if I said I am the most up to date on the literature around female cycles. I do apologise. Very fortunate that I have some fantastic women around me that keep me updated on certain stuff. But it very much depends on the woman. Obviously, females are at higher risk of ACL injuries certain time of the month or whatever. But I think from my understanding of modern literature, which again I will apologise, so if anybody listening to this wants to correct me, please feel free to send me the relevant info and I'll read it and take it on board. Some females are going to respond differently to others. Some will have more of a severe effect based on their cycle. Some are going to have a less adverse effect. Like the example is with strength training, you get a lot of female influencers that will sort of market it as, well, you shouldn't train as hard on that week or whatever. But there'll be a lot of women, especially a lot of women athletes, where that doesn't cause an issue. They're very capable to train as hard as they want all the time. But there are going to be some women who have quite severe period problems, aren't they? So it's very much a case-by-case basis. Yes, you can make smart decisions, like for yourself, like if you're training in a live environment all the time, just changing the task that you're doing might be a more beneficial thing to do. It raises that question of like, is it always necessary? I guess is the case. And you might find that one woman is doing it because they've read this research, but what's actually happening is they might not be at a higher risk, but what they're actually doing is losing a week of training every month. as opposed to continuously training. But there might be some women who it's very, very justifiable, like they have adverse effects from the periods, whatever it is, ligament flexibility, all this different stuff that happens to women when they go through that cycle change, where you're like, no, you need to make better decisions on that week relative to your body and changes.
Yeah, it's hard because I remember, interestingly enough, when I really had periods where my sleep was on point, my nutrition was on point, kind of as on point as I could get, then I also hardly felt it. That even my husband didn't even realize that I was
Yeah, yeah.
on it. But then when I wasn't so on point, then it was more of a thing. So I guess, I mean, again, this is just personal anecdote, so I have absolutely no research to back me up on this. Just my
Yeah,
personal
yeah.
experience. That indeed, when moments where holistically things are on point, I felt that I could indeed train hard all the time. But when not, then I really was like, no, now I feel just somehow off or weaker.
Yeah. Yeah, and obviously, obviously, I've not got any anecdotal experience with that, so I can't really add to that. But the only thing I can talk about is the women that I have worked with in the space, and again, it's very much a case by case basis. Some of them, it's just like, all right, I've got my period. What do you want me to do about it? Like, they'll just crack on. Others, it might be a case of like, I've got my period. I'm just having an easier week. No problem. Crack on. Do what you need to do. Like, who am I to I can't stand there and go, no, you need to do this. Like, yeah, you're fine. It's your body. You tell me what you need to do and I'll support you.
Yeah, yet you say this with a smile, but I unfortunately also have known coaches that from different sports also that have a different, they don't care. They're like, you're here to train, so train. So, I mean, I'm
Yeah.
glad that you probably are already way, way, way more informed than many other coaches. So that
Yeah.
is important
Well,
thing,
like I
I
said,
think.
I'm very fortunate to have a lot of good women around me. So that always helps keep me in check. Hol's just put a thumb up to me as well as she's walked past. Her being one of the main ones, but yeah. So I can't claim to be perfect all the time, but I'm definitely kept in check as I needed to be.
Good. I mean, to be fair, we all need to be kept in check.
Yeah, of
Being a
course,
woman,
that's
there are
it.
many things that I don't know about guys either, so they need to
Yeah.
inform me as well. It goes both ways.
I mean, we're just simple. We're all idiots, so boys are much easier.
Yes, but in my school, at least they're my idiots.
Yeah, true. That is true. That is true.
That's true. As we come to a close, is there anything you would like to share, whether that's on things that you offer or maybe some other myths or some other things that you think we didn't cover and we should still cover?
No, I think we covered most things. I think the only thing that obviously I would say, the biggest thing I would say in terms of if somebody's listening to this, and I don't know, obviously there's a lot of confusion around, the two biggest pieces of advice I can give you is if you are unsure, find somebody who you trust, works within the space that you want to improve in, and obviously has the evidence, whether that be from an educational background, from an experience background, to back that up. Just have a conversation with them. If they're worthwhile, if they're worth the time, they will send you as many messages as you usually want without charge. If they try and charge you for that sort of stuff, then you could politely tell them to go and fuck off. Sorry for swearing. But yeah, so that'd be advice number one, is if you're ever unsure, like in anything, go and seek somebody out who knows what they're talking about. Like if your car broke down, you'd go and find a mechanic, wouldn't you? So it's the same thing with this sort of stuff, is go and find someone you trust. I can obviously speak for myself in that if somebody wants information, I'm happy to conversate. Obviously, you can hopefully preach to that at this point. It's no skin off my back. And obviously, if you want somebody to take care of that for you, and it's a worthwhile coach, pay them the money. They can save you a lot of time, a lot of effort, and they'll do the work for you. And the next thing I would say relative to that is always start with where you're at, not where you want to be. So it's really, really important to have a relative understanding of where you are. If that's like we talked about chin-ups, if you can't do chin-ups, start with the place where you're at and just use that to progress yourself. Don't do any more than you need to. Don't do any less than you need to. Just find that level that allows you to continuously improve, and just slowly build yourself up. It's a key thing with nuance in terms of training for sport is getting better at something is always a better thing. So you might not be able to read a piece of literature and go, well, I can't do 3 chin-ups with half of my body weight, but you're still going to get benefit from being able to go from doing 1 chin-up to 3 chin-ups just using your body weight. You're going to see improvement. You're going to feel better. You're going to be able to move better. You're going to be more resilient to injuries or different stuff. So always start with where you're at, not where you want to be. In terms of plugs, I guess off the back of that, obviously I am a strength and conditioning coach who works in a remote capacity. So obviously I run a business called Brotherhood Performance, which is primarily focused around working remotely with grapplers, as I said at the start. And like I said, if people want to talk, they want information, I'm happy to give my time where I can. I obviously run a jiu-jitsu gym as well. We talk a lot about jiu-jitsu. We've not actually talked about skill development and that side of things. Maybe we save that for another time. But yeah, so obviously I run a gym called the Grappling Society. So if anyone, obviously, I know obviously you're in Germany, not that anyone tends to be coming to Bamber Bridge very often, but if anyone's ever in the north of England, they are more than welcome to drop in and try one of our classes.
Well, I can definitely attest to you taking time to answering my questions also through. So to the listeners, that's true. I can attest to that. And well, I definitely want to visit you guys because I'm actually so happy that more life work gyms are arising, because there was a moment where I really didn't really know where to go when I was traveling.
Yeah.
So I definitely want to explore the north because there is quite a lot. I mean, just also the Manchester area and Wigan.
Yeah,
There are many.
jiu-jitsu around here is quite a big thing. There's a lot of big gyms. There's not, as far as I'm aware, I wouldn't say there are many gyms that utilize more constraints, especially in the manner that we do it. I've been fortunate that I've been doing it for quite a long time now. There'll definitely be places that are playing around with it. So Libby, who is the athlete that I work with, her dad trains at a gym in Manchester, and he is very much sort of up to trend on this. But obviously, it's a massive, that is a huge gym. They have a huge timetable, so he only runs 2 classes, I think, a week. I'm not very good at staying up to date what other people are doing, to be completely honest with you. I've got enough things to worry about doing my own thing, so I don't spend too much time, unfortunately. Yeah, the jiu-jitsu scene in the north is fantastic. Even if it's just open mats, there are gyms that are all full of good people and different styles of training, different ways of doing things, which makes it quite a thriving little area.
Yeah, that's why I really want to visit. But indeed, I know because I listened to you and Ed, and you, like us, were also, as you called before, the Greg
Yeah,
era.
pre GS, that's what I call it, the pre Greg era.
How did you find it?
I actually put a post about this on Instagram the other day. It was actually a very, very selfish reason that got me into the constraint-led approach. It was nothing to do with, it was semi to do with coaching, but if I'm completely honest, it was how can I get as good as I want to get? So like most people, like I think I was like a purple belt, so it was about six years ago when I first started thinking about these things, competing a lot, and I was just like, I'm just not getting what I want out of this. I was doing quite well. I was being relatively successful, but I was like, it's not quite what I want. And the 2 big things that drove me in the direction of it was, first and foremost, was I, again, selfishly was like, right, well, I'm teaching this group of people. How can I get all these people better so that I get better training, essentially? Again, very selfish, I'm aware. And then the other thing was like, I'm teaching this stuff, but the same people just keep asking the same questions on the same topic. So I'm doing a terrible job of this, or something's just not working. The way that this information is getting across to people isn't happening. So I started thinking, and I was always aware that sparring was the most impactful thing we did. I knew that. I didn't know why, but I knew that was where most people are going to get the most benefit from. So what I originally started doing was breaking things down. Like, I still look at it very much from a traditional view. Elements of games, I was just like, right, well, if we're doing closed guard, I know that the first battle that is going to happen is the hands, is posture and hands. I started trying to put games together, and again, it wasn't very good by any stretch of the imagination. And then I just, because obviously I'd come from a science background, sports science degree, all that different stuff. Obviously, my job is quite heavily involved around reading literature and books and all this different stuff. I was like, well, I'm just going to start reading about coaching science and skill acquisition. And then slowly but surely, this word just kept popping up. And I was like, this is interesting. Everyone keeps mentioning this, especially in like more modern views approach to skill acquisition. And it was ecological dynamics, and started reading. And I was like, all the questions I had or had over the years in terms of getting better at jiu-jitsu just started to get answered to me. And I was like, well, this makes sense. It's accounting for individual differences. We've got all these things about constraint and stuff like that I'd sort of noticed when I was training. Like if I'd had a knee injury, I'd changed the way I trained. And oh, hang on, am I still with you? Oh, sorry, my missus just rang me. That's all. So I just had it's just opened my laptop. Sorry about that. So all of these things that like all these questions that I'd had started to fit, and so I started to take this idea of a constraint-led approach. Started reading books, like obviously like Rob Gray's stuff. I'm terrible at remembering names. It's one of my key flaws when it comes to like giving people references. I'm shocking at it. But like there's like the constraint-led approach book. There's Rob Gray's stuff. There was obviously all the different literature, and just started to apply it. And then that's when like Greg exploded onto the scene, and he started talking about invariance and his definitions of grappling. And I was like, shit, this is brilliant. This is the best explanation of grappling I've ever heard. And then again, like reached out to Ed, started speaking to Ed quite a lot. And he was really good because Ed, obviously Ed's, I really like Ed because he's very, very pragmatic. And that's obviously a big thing that I'm big on in coaching is pragmatism. I'm not like, we don't consider ourselves like an eco gym, quote unquote, an eco gym for many reasons, but for the main reason being humans are complex. Like I just, no matter how good research is, there's a reason it's changed. Like there used to be one way of thinking about it. It's changing now, but that doesn't mean there's not going to be something else that emerges in the future. So I just, hand on heart, as somebody who really cares about integrity in coaching, can't go, I've found the answer to everything. I just can't, hand on heart, do it. I use it because I think it's incredibly valuable. I think it's brilliant, but hand on heart, I can't go, ecological dynamics is the answer to all my problems. But yeah, so Ed brought in a load of pragmatism, a lot of stuff to do with like understanding the room, different ways of approaching practice, and all his insights from that standpoint. Oh, she's ringing me again. But yeah, so I just that was basically the reason why we got into it eventually, and now we obviously own a gym. We do it full time.
I think this is very cool and also important indeed to say that COA is an imperfect theory.
And that's obviously something that Ed talks about, isn't it? Is that it isn't this answered approach.
Yeah, to everything. It's like, I think it's one of the better things we have at the moment. And that's also because I also at times when people wanted to know more about COA and I tried to explain them more about COA, then when it was something that they didn't like or they found it hard to understand, that I then got accused of being like COA police. But I'm like, no, you asked me about the theory, so I tried to explain to you the theory. But it doesn't mean that for me it's gospel and that's written in stone, because it's just something that we have. I'm pretty sure that in 5 or 10 years from now, things will be already different and we will be better. So
100%, and that really is clear. I'm not one of these people that this science is everything, but obviously it helps. Theory and understanding help dictate the decisions we make in the training room. And there are certain things within it that we don't know. Like there's different theories. You've got internal processing, you've got active inference, you've got ecological dynamics, you've got elements of behaviorism within that. That positive, negative reinforcement, all this different stuff that goes into human behavior. I don't think we as essentially jiu-jitsu practitioners can have the arrogance to go, now we've got the answers. But within that, it's shaping the way that the thing I always use as references, like people think this is a jiu-jitsu thing. It's not a jiu-jitsu thing. Like I always reference this, what's his name? Fabian Otte. I hope I pronounced that right. He's obviously done a lot of work on like representative learning environments. He's the goalkeeping coach at Liverpool Football Club. One of the biggest football clubs, one of the biggest sporting teams on earth. Like it's not a jiu-jitsu thing. Like it's a sport thing. Sport, how we understand sport is changing and body performance, all this different stuff. Like the same thing with injury. It's not just this, we do this and this happens. It's complex and it's variable and it's all this different stuff. And we've got different people from different backgrounds with different experiences. And I just can't in good conscience go, this is the way that we've got to do it. And that's it.
Yeah, I think that what I see right now is indeed that there's others, some coaches, I think, are a bit arrogant in the sense that they are like, yeah, but my feeling says, I have observed. And I'm like, yeah, there's space for that. It's important. But I know, for instance, my body type is so different from my husband. So I cannot speak for other people. And that's why I like that there are theories or other practices or methods in place that hold you also in check. And it goes both ways. But of course, as with everything, it is dynamic. So we always need to be open for what's next. No, I like. I saw recently from 2019 made this one of the first games we created based on what Dederher was talking, because it was so much, and we were like, how can we make it practical? How can we make a game out of it? And as you say, our beginning games, they were cute. They were definitely not efficient, but it was there. And what it's now, and when I look in our training room and new people start, it's like amazing. I'm like, in a positive sense, jealous of them. So
yeah. It is wild that the I always think about this as like the experience of how a beginner coming into our gym now, how different their experience of learning jiu-jitsu is going to be from when I first started. It's something that I'm always really, really conscious of, is that every piece of information and every way that and don't get me wrong, I'm absolutely not saying that I'm perfect, but it's just something that I try and be aware of, is every time I explain something, I've got especially to a beginner, I've got the potential to impact their entire jiu-jitsu career. And it, like I said, I'm absolutely not claiming to have nailed this. I definitely mess it up at times, like we all do. But it's something that I'm aware of. I'm always trying to think like, right, how can I explain this as clearly and as unbiased as possible? It's not what I'm doing. It's just a thing. This is the thing. It's nothing what I like doing. It's nothing what Josh, who my co-partner, likes doing. It's just the thing we do in a sport. It's an attractor state, for want of to use the technical framework. It is just a thing. You can like it, you don't like it. It's just neutral. We're just doing this. This is what we're doing because it's important.
Well said. And yes, to all of that. So thank you, Hardy, for this lovely talk. And
you're very welcome. Thank you for having me on.
And like I said, Alex and I, we do travel quite a lot in the UK, so I hope we can visit you very soon.
100%, 100%. You're always welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hardy, for this inspiring and myth debunking talk. As stated on the podcast, I'm currently working with him, and I couldn't be happier with his workouts and particularly his ongoing support. For further information on how to work with Hardy too, please check the show notes below. Thank you for now, and talk soon.